Hi, my name is Audrey Kitagawa, and I'm the president and founder of the International Academy for Multicultural Cooperation and president of the Light of Awareness International Spiritual Family. Today on this show, we will talk about the importance of our values and our personal responsibility to make this world a better place.
Welcome back to part 2 of our delicious conversation with Audrey Kitagawa. Now, Audrey is an extraordinary lady. She is the recipient of the Spirit of the UN Award, which is given to outstanding individuals who have demonstrated the vision and spirit of the United Nations as expressed through the UN Charter and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. She is also the founder and president of a civil society organization, which is the Multicultural Cooperation. You can find out more about that, of course, at www.multiculturalcooperation.net. Welcome back, Audrey.
Thank you.
So let's get into this. Let's talk about exactly that. Let's talk about multicultural cooperation. Now, as I said, you're the founder and president of that. But let's talk about, what does that mean, multicultural cooperation? There's a lot of those kinds of words that are thrown around these days. I want to give it nuts and bolts. What does it mean?
Well, as I had indicated earlier in our conversation, that, in our globalized world, we do see the diversity that exists in all the different peoples of the world, and they arise out of a certain cultural context. Mm-hmm. And so in this age of transcendence, where really borders are disappearing, except maybe in a southern border of the U.S. But
okay.
But actually, it transcends borders, and we get to see how, in all of the diversity, we have to move to the deeper understanding to come to, really appreciating the beauty and richness of the different cultures, in all of their songs, the dances, their food, their language. I mean, it's totally a fascinating multitude of people, and how they have grown up, their histories, and how they are living today, and really the uniqueness. And it is that uniqueness that we appreciate and celebrate all over the world with the many festivals and remembrances.
And as that is definitely the case, it's undeniably the case, there's also undeniably the case of tribalism going on. The rigidity of borders that didn't exist even before has become more so. We're seeing nationalist groups that have grown across the world, not just in the United States. But we've seen the rise of that in France. We've seen it in Hungary. We're seeing it in the Philippines. It's and certainly in some African countries. We're seeing the rise of that. It's about us. We got to look after our own, and excluding and othering and doing all those things. So there seems to be this disparagement between these two realities, which is one side of us is like you and I, wanting to embrace the multiculturalism, wanting to embrace the beauty and magnificence of a different culture coming in to each other. And then on the other side, there is those with enough power and influence who are saying, hold on a second, we got to protect our own. So what we need to look at here, and I know it's part of what you're doing, is how do we bridge that gap? How do we make the people who are on that right-hand side of the lens, who are seeing things as very tribal, realize the value and the importance of embracing a multicultural identity or multicultural inclusivity, particularly when multiculturalism feels like a threat, and it has felt like a threat to many of those individuals?
Well, I think the operative word that you use here is threat. And that word is based upon fear. Mm-hmm. So it arises out of fear consciousness. And putting the starkness of the polarity of me versus them. So me versus the other. And it is exactly that kind of mindset that has helped to create, authoritarian regimes that ultimately threaten our freedom, and to create policies that ultimately lose the freedom of the populace and create directives that can cause processes of dehumanization to take place that ultimately can lead to the death of massive numbers of people. So, part of what we must do is to ever, first of all, be mindful of how we are minding and living our lives and the kinds of thoughts, speech, and conduct which we embrace. And to the extent they do not elevate the spirit, they do not elevate and honor the dignity of the sacredness of each person, then we really need to check ourselves. Because you see, this was going to go back to the origination of our conversation. We cannot escape it because our lives are sacred. And when we move from fear consciousness, we mobilize and set into the civic space that consciousness of fear that creates all kinds of identities of, like, for example, you use the word tribalism, that seems to establish a separate identity from distinguish ourselves from others and to keep ourselves in our sense of righteousness. And in all of that, the externalities of the clothing of identity that we try to wear and try to preserve, but in ways that cause the extermination of the other for our own self-preservation. This is where we have to be very, very mindful not to accelerate and mobilize that kind of thinking and action that create the processes of dehumanization.
So in the context of, let's say, because we know this is true, that our listener is likely to be a Fortune 500 executive. There are many others, of course, but in the context of that, what can they practically do inside of their organization to make what you're suggesting more tangible? What can they actually do?
Well, first of all, hopefully the leaders themselves will work on their own enlightened processes so that they would be able to support these programs and educational processes within their own organization that ultimately call for the continuous dignity and respect for the other. And to drop fear consciousness and to move to the frame of harmony and peace and caring and compassion for each other. Now, as we know, recently Jeff Bezos went into space. When he came back from space, he gave $100 million to Van Jones. And what he acknowledged about Van Jones was that he was able to, create this discourse in the civic space that was respectful and dignified, even though he moved in those spaces that were highly polarized. But he was, had an open, inquiring mind about the positions that people took. And even though they may not have been, in alignment with his points of view, it is this ability and willingness to engage with the other on a platform of mutual respect and openness. And that is the difference between moving from that fear consciousness and rather moving from that consciousness of embracing the other. Because ultimately we are not indistinct from the other. The other is ourselves.
Of course. But nonetheless, as a leader in an organization who is probably not the owner, and so answers to, even the CEO answers to the board and the shareholders, etc., is feeling, okay, I get this, I would like to do this, but I have to sell this to them, them being whoever's in charge of that person. Why would I put the effort into that? Like I'm asking you to share with us, you know, how they can get this across, that this needs to be an initiative inside of our quote organization.
Well, it's going to be depend on the values that ultimately the leadership embraces,
Mm-hmm.
and whether or not the values are in alignment with those values that actually promote harmony, respect, dignity, and compassion for the other. Now, the
Mm-hmm.
second person that Jeff Bezos gave $100 million to was that chef. And what he loved about the chef was that he had created a response mechanism to help people in need. And he created these, kitchens to feed the people in need, whether,
Mm-hmm.
they experience disaster through natural disasters, or, during the time of COVID. But here was a person who mobilized the chefs to actually run these kitchens to help the community.
Mm-hmm.
What did that express? It was an expression of love, compassion, caring in action, and moving on it. And so, this $100 million allows him now to magnify the work.
Mm-hmm.
And so Jeff Bezos is a good example of having somebody in, the world's wealthiest man and a very powerful company, but utilizing the profits in recognition of ultimately people who live and express their values of caring, compassion, and honoring the dignity of others. Ultimately, don't go wrong taking the high road in life.
No, but to push back, the argument would be that's great. Meanwhile, his workers don't get breaks. They don't get to go to the bathroom. They get very short lunch breaks and underpaid. So great, you gave 100 million to them, to the chef, to Van Jones. Meanwhile, his own workers are suffering. It's kind of, a bit hypocritical.
Well, I think it starts the conversation as well to
Yes.
expand the benefits for the workers. And, depending on which reports you read, the workers were paid, the $15 an hour or whatever. But and also there's been write-ups about the contrary. So, whenever you are in creation, you're going to have the pairs of opposites running all the time.
Always.
And of course, if the workers have legitimate complaints, as they often do, that they should be able to, mobilize, and they have opportunities as well, and to determine whether or not that they are going to advocate for their greater benefits. So one of the things I think he did acknowledge was the fact that he was able to be here in that place of great privilege, thanks to all of the people who allowed him to be there and have placed him there through their hard work. And this is true of every leader, Dov. And that is, we do not get to where we are on our own.
No, and I
Many.
think there's another piece in here, which is, again, to this, addressing this duality, is that we like to shove people in a box so that we can categorize them. And what I know in my own life, in the life of the extraordinary leaders that I guide and assist through what they do, is we are multifaceted creatures. We are not single faceted. We sometimes like to cling to a single facet as an identity, but we're not that. Nobody is all good. Nobody is all bad. And I think that it's very easy to shove people in those categories. So do I think, I do a lot of research and work around, and I've worked with leaders from Amazon. Um, do I think that workers are treated poorly, and do I think that they fight against the unions and all that? Yeah, I know it's true. Absolutely. Did Bezos give $100 million? Yeah, that's also true. Is one um, uh, an opposite of the other? I don't know that it is. I don't know that it's not just another facet. It's entirely possible that it was a tax move and that it was a PR move. Of course, that's entirely possible. But I know that, for instance, not all Jews are Zionists. I know that not all Muslims are jihadists. I know that not all Christians are evangelicals. I know that not all. It's very easy to put people in a clump, whether they are in a group or even as an individual, and say, "Oh, this is what you're about," rather than understanding that we are all these multifaceted. And I think that, and I'd love to hear your point on this, but I like to think that as leaders, that is a big part of our responsibility. Instead of seeing the person as, well, this person is Japanese, or this person is Jamaican, or this person is Russian, but that's a nationality, but that's not the person. This person is that color. That's a color or race, but that's not the person. There's all these facets. And that it seems to me the only way we can overcome any of these problems that we're facing is to recognize that we're multifaceted, that there's much more to us than what appears on the surface.
You're absolutely right, Dov. I don't disagree with you at all. And of course, who we are, in year 1 is very different who we are in year 20 or 40 or 50. Mm-hmm. So it is an evolving process, and it is also the evolutionary flow of our consciousness individually and collectively. So, as a human family. So mm-hmm. we are all representative of the multifaceted universe and society and individuals that we are. So we're all part and parcel of the many, many pieces of information that informs us and helps to create us and to help us on our search for the deeper meaning of life. So yes, all these facets. And
that brings us full circle back to the piece where we started, which is that whatever your being the individual, your journey is, whether it's through becoming a lawyer or becoming an accountant, becoming a scientist, becoming a priest, a dancer, an artist, or whatever journey you take, we're all confronted with this ultimate question, which is, what is the meaning of this for me? What does this actually mean in my life? Not what is the meaning of this, as in I got an award, but what is that? Why am I doing what I'm doing? Why are we doing what we're doing? It's the entire basis of the work that I do. Everything we do is around what is discovering meaning and finding the original source code for each individual and organizations and even countries. But that search for meaning, I really would love to hear from you as we come towards the end of this second part of the show. What would you say is the best guidance for a leader leading his organization to look towards what is our meaning?
Well, first, that he find the meaning within himself and what she has clarity mm-hmm. about the values that they embrace mm-hmm. and whether or not they will have the commitment and the courage to bring those values into the organization or wherever they may be, so that you are actually living your values and are in alignment with them and coherent mm-hmm. with your values. Mm-hmm. Many people, Dov, do not cannot articulate to you what their values are because they've never spent the time to really do the examination of what is really meaningful to them. So we all have an obligation, because wherever we go, we have to take ourselves along. We can never be apart from ourselves. Yes, we can go on vacation, but who's going on vacation with you? You're going on vacation with you. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people try to escape from the reality or the context in which they find themselves, but they're always going to take themselves wherever they go. So it's very important that we work on ourselves. So the true leader is able to not only be the manifestation of the values that they embrace, but is able to bring those values as a living reality into the space in which they exist, work, live, and play.
Yeah. I think the values work, being willing to examine one's values is profoundly important. And again, a caution with it though is this is not something you can do at a superficial level. There are a lot of people who are consultants and such who are offering to work with you to help you discover your values. And the question for me is, have you found your values? Do you know, and not just your values, because in our work we talk about the difference between values and maxims. And values are often societal. People will say things that are generalized, like my highest value is family. What does that mean? Because even that doesn't have meaning until you give it meaning. So some people meaning family means, we are blood related, and no matter what you do, you're always going to get forgiveness because you're blood related. For me, family doesn't mean blood. It's got nothing to do with blood. I have some family members who have blood with me, but most of my family members are not. They're my, quote, it's what I term it, my spiritual family. They're people who love and support me, and I love and support them, and we're trying to make a greater difference in the world. That's my spiritual family. So I think that values work is vital, Audrey. I think you're absolutely right. I think it's vital for an organization, but it's not possible without the individual, without the leader being the example setter, to be that person who says, here's the model. I'm going to look at my values. Let's look at yours, and let's see how we can bring that together in this organization. What is in your context, what is the purpose of business? I mean, we could talk about the problems in it. We've talked about that with the global economy and extractive industries, et cetera. But what are we missing?
It's that expression of, ultimately caring and creating, the being responsible, being a responsible citizen, not only as an individual, but as a corporate entity, as a business entity, to be responsible to your community.
Yes.
And contribute to the well-being of the community.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes a huge difference when you move from that space. So it moves it from a predatory, extractive space to one of sharing and giving and caring. And these are very important words because the precision of the language that we use informs our thought processes, informs our speech, and ultimately informs our action. So we should elevate our speech and be very careful not to put out dangerous, destructive language, because right then and there is a diminishment of not only yourself, but of the community. So we all have responsibility as individuals, and whatever context that we may be living and working in, whether in family life, whether in business life. And to live life takes courage to be able to implement your values in a way that can make a difference, that will elevate others, be the expression of love and compassion and caring. Always the most dignified people that I have met in the world. It's nothing to do with what they own, but it is the essence of who they are, as gracious, generous people of spirit who freely share their love and compassion with others. These are the great unsung heroes that are all around us, and they work quietly, because selfless service in service to humanity is never about self-aggrandizement.
Absolutely.
Humble, and it is kind. And that is what we need. Every moment that we live is an opportunity to be an expression of that. And may that be our legacy in life. You know, Viktor Frankl.
What a beautiful place to finish. Thank you so much, Audrey. Thank you for that. Would you please tell our listeners, our viewers, where they can find out more about you, your organization, and all the wonderful resources there?
Thank you so much. So the International Academy for Multicultural Cooperation, you can go to our website, www.multiculturalcooperation.net. And also you can go to lightofawareness.org to look at our spiritual community. So thank you so much for this opportunity to share about that, Dov.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you, Audrey. I hope you'll stay with us to the end. And for you, dear listener, remember that you can hang out with other conscious leaders. You can chat about this episode that you've been listening to or any of our past episodes by going into Facebook or LinkedIn groups. Just look for the Leadership and Loyalty podcast. The truth of the matter is, it doesn't matter how successful you are. If your employees and your customers don't understand what gives your company meaning, you're only working at a fraction of your true capability. To find out how you can hire me, Dov Baron, as a speaker or leadership strategist for yourself or your organization, you simply go to dovbaron.com. That's DOVBARON.com. Because unified meaning is the one single monolithic difference between mediocrity and greatness for all individuals and companies. We want to thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Till next time, stay curious, my friends. Stay curious about how you can step into a higher level of leading through your values to create a deeper connection, multicultural connection with everybody around you. I'm Dov Baron. I'm here to assist you tapping into your deepest meaning to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.